He had so much money that he had to bury part of it. But what Pablo Escobar hid inside that vault goes far beyond wealth. It will make you question what we really know about the most feared man in history. If you think you've already heard everything about Escobar, get ready. In the next few seconds, something that remained hidden for more than 3 decades finally comes to light, and what was found inside that secret vault is disturbing, enigmatic, and completely beyond anything investigators ever imagined. So take a deep breath, because what you're about to see now begins where all documentaries stop. When authorities opened one of the last underground structures attributed to the cartel, they expected nothing more than rotten cash, but instead discovered something that reignites old theories, lays bare secrets, and reveals dangerously controversial facets of Escobar's life, including suspicious records, personal objects that should not exist, and relics many believed had been destroyed. And before I continue, go ahead and click like and subscribe to the channel, because that helps YouTube understand this content deserves to be recommended to more people. When you subscribe, you help keep this work from being swallowed by the algorithm and allow more hidden stories like this one to reach you. And if you want to support even more, you can use Super Thanks, which helps the channel keep producing deep, investigative, hard-to-find videos. But if you can't, no problem. Leave a comment below telling us which part of the story has shocked you the most so far. Now, back to the focus. When the heavy vault door finally gave way, a stench of decades sealed inside flooded the tunnel, revealing packages of disintegrated cash, gold bars of controversial origin, illegible documents, notebooks written in mysterious codes, and even personal items that completely rewrite who Escobar really was. Many of these items raised serious questions. Why did he keep maps of secret routes that no longer exist? Why were there sealed cassette tapes labeled with strategic dates? And what exactly did the scribbled notes about meetings that were never officially recorded mean? Stay with me until the end, because the final revelation found in that vault, an artifact no one expected, will simply leave you stunned. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on December 1, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, the son of a small farmer and a rural schoolteacher. He grew up in a context of economic limitations that shaped his ambitious character and his early desire for social mobility. Still young, Escobar became involved in petty crimes such as smuggling and car theft before plunging, in the 1970s, into cocaine trafficking, a field that would transform him into the head of the Medellín Cartel, responsible for about 80% of the cocaine that flooded international markets in the 1980s and early 1990s, making him one of the richest and most feared criminals on the planet. On a personal level, in 1976 Escobar married Maria Victoria Henao, who was only 15 years old at the time, sparking controversy due to the large age gap and the circumstances of the relationship. Together they had 2 children, Juan Pablo and Manuela, who grew up amid a lifestyle filled with luxury, constant fear, and social isolation because of their father's legacy. Despite a public image that oscillated between benefactor and criminal, since he invested in social projects in poor neighborhoods of Colombia in an attempt to cultivate a Robin Hood reputation, Escobar was also known for extreme violence, operating under the philosophy of plata o plomo, silver or lead, offering either bribes or death to anyone who opposed his interests. His cartel was responsible for a wave of violence, bombings, kidnappings, assassinations of authorities and civilians, and an open war with the Colombian state and rivals such as the Cali cartel. For nearly a year and a half, Pablo Escobar lived as a fugitive, constantly changing hideouts, abandoning locations quickly, and using his vast network of allies and resources to evade arrests and ambushes. Violence in the country was at a critical point, with clashes among armed groups, police forces, the military, and rival factions. His determination to avoid being captured alive and his fear of extradition to the United States were so intense that he reportedly said he would rather have a grave in Colombia than a cell in an American prison, reflecting his resolve not to surrender to foreign authorities as long as he was alive. In late 1993, his location was finally traced through intercepted communications and the tracking of a phone call in Medellín. Colombian special forces from the search block surrounded the place where he was hiding in the Los Olivos neighborhood in the western part of the city. after months of intensive monitoring with technical support from the United States. When police moved in on December 2, 1993, just one day after Escobar turned 44, an intense chase and shootout unfolded across the rooftops of nearby houses. Escobar and his bodyguard, Alvaro de Jesus Agudelo, known as El Limón, attempted to escape across the roofs but were struck by multiple gunshots. He was wounded in the torso, legs, and most fatally, the head. Although the official version states that he was killed by bullets fired during the confrontation, the nature of the wounds led to speculation and theories about whether he may have shot himself to avoid capture, as he had reportedly instructed his family on how to do so if cornered. Escobar's death was a traumatic turning point for Colombia. On one hand, the fall of the Medellín Cartel's leader marked the collapse of an organization that had dominated trafficking routes and spilled blood across the country for years. Many politicians, police officers, civilians, and even journalists fell victim to his violence and cruel orders, whether for rejecting bribes or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time, leaving an incalculable trail of human suffering. On the other hand, part of the population, especially in Medellín's poorer neighborhoods where Escobar funded social projects, mourned his death and attended his funeral in large numbers. Estimates suggest that more than 25,000 people were present to pay tribute to the man who, for some, represented a confusing mix of fear and gratitude. The tragedy of his death lies not only in the bullets that brought him down, but in the legacy he left behind: millions of lives impacted by addiction, families destroyed by violence, and a nation still struggling to heal deep wounds caused by decades of war against drug trafficking. Escobar's death simultaneously ended an era of terror and ushered in a new phase of fragmentation in the drug trade, as rivals sought to fill the power vacuum he left behind, leading to even more conflict and redefining the geography of organized crime in Colombia and Latin America in the decades that followed. Since the name Pablo Escobar entered world history as one of the most wanted, feared, and at the same time most studied men of the 20th century, countless stories, legends, and mysteries have come to surround his life, his fortune, and the secrets hidden in properties scattered throughout Colombia and even beyond its borders. Among all these mysteries, few have been as widely discussed as the existence of secret safes, supposedly buried, hidden behind false walls, built into fireplaces, sunk into concrete floors, or even camouflaged in abandoned properties that once belonged to the cartel. The possibility of finding these safes has always fueled the imagination of investigators, journalists, curious onlookers, and even modern-day treasure hunters, who believed that Escobar, known for burying large sums of money to hide them from the police and the government, had left behind not only mountains of cash, but also documents, photographs, special weapons, personal items, and previously unknown details about his life. For decades, many of these rumors were treated as exaggerated, almost folkloric tales. However, recently, one of these supposed safes finally came to light, literally, and became one of the most intriguing events connected to his figure. The revelation began when an old farm, located on the outskirts of Medellín and once belonging to Escobar's close circle, entered a renovation process. The property had been abandoned for a long time, and the new family who acquired it intended to turn the place into a historic inn, preserving part of its architecture and rural atmosphere while renewing structures damaged by time. It was then that workers excavating an area of the basement noticed a strange vibration in the ground. The sound was hollow and unusual, immediately drawing the attention of the site supervisor. After a few hours of careful digging, a thick piece of metal, darkened by decades of wear, began to emerge. The structure was heavy and rectangular, with reinforced hinges. There was no longer any doubt, it was a safe. The rumor spread quickly, and although the property owners did not want publicity, it was impossible to prevent the news from reaching curious ears. To avoid any legal issues, the authorities were called, and a group of specialists in restoration and the opening of old safes was summoned. The anticipation in the air was almost palpable. After all, that safe could contain virtually anything: deteriorated cash, gold bars, cartel documents, forgotten drugs, Escobar's personal belongings, or even historical evidence of great investigative value. The safe was sealed with an extremely complex mechanism, revealing the level of paranoia Escobar had regarding the protection of his assets. External markings showed that it had been custom-made, likely using imported materials and reinforced to withstand explosions, fire, and drilling. It took nearly an entire day of continuous work before the specialists were finally able to unlock the internal mechanism. When the heavy, rusted door slowly opened, everyone present fell into absolute silence, as if they were standing before something capable of changing the historical understanding of the cartel era. The smell that came from inside was a mixture of intense mold and oxidized metal, a reminder of the long confinement of that space. When powerful flashlights illuminated the interior, what they saw surprised even the most skeptical. Inside the safe, stacked in a disorganized manner, were several smaller metal boxes, packages wrapped in aged fabric, envelopes, and objects partially destroyed by years of moisture. The first package opened immediately drew attention. It was a collection of bundles of US dollars, many of them practically petrified by humidity. Even in their deteriorated state, the bills displayed impressive amounts. It was estimated that, in their original condition, that bundle would have represented hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps even more. But that was only the beginning. One of the metal boxes contained something even more surprising. Dozens of notebooks and planners, handwritten, filled with dates, names, numbers, and codes. These documents were not merely financial notes. Many appeared to be meticulous records of the cartel's internal operations, with details that had never been disclosed before. Listed there were transactions, routes, amounts paid to collaborators, bribe payments, property purchases, and even names that, until then, had never been publicly associated with Escobar's inner circle. It was as if that safe held a forgotten chapter of Colombia's criminal history. Another extremely intriguing item found was a collection of photographs. Some were well preserved, others were partially damaged by moisture. The images showed Escobar in previously unseen situations, informal moments with allies, private parties, secret trips, and even meetings with individuals whose identities were still under investigation. For historians and journalists, this material could offer valuable clues about unknown cartel connections and internal dynamics that had previously belonged only to the realm of speculation. Among the most unexpected objects were personal items that seemed to hold sentimental value. A luxury watch with an inscription, several gold rings with engraved initials, a small silver cross, family photographs, and even a child's notebook, possibly belonging to one of Escobar's children, with simple drawings and innocent phrases. These objects stood in stark contrast to the darker findings, revealing a human side that rarely appears when he is discussed. Perhaps the most surprising item, and the one that truly left everyone speechless, was a set of old-format videotapes. Each tape had a handwritten label with dates and locations. Although their exact content was still being analyzed, experts believe they may contain private recordings made during internal cartel meetings and events. If confirmed, this would be material of immeasurable historical value, potentially capable of rewriting important parts of the narrative surrounding the peak of international drug trafficking in the 1980s. In addition, another completely unexpected element was found at the bottom of the safe, a small sealed box containing banking documents related to overseas accounts, some of which had never been identified by authorities. These records could help explain where part of Escobar's missing fortune was funneled. As if that were not enough, there were also architectural blueprints of properties not listed in official records, suggesting that the cartel owned hidden real estate where clandestine activities were carried out. The discovery of the safe sparked countless ethical and legal debates. After all, many of the items found were potentially relevant evidence for historical investigations, while others were personal objects that raised questions about privacy. Colombian authorities, together with international experts, began working on cataloging and preserving the contents, ensuring that everything was analyzed responsibly and without shallow sensationalism. Public reaction was immediate. Documentaries began to be produced, experts were invited to debate the impact of the discovery, and international media turned their attention back to Medellín. However, the narrative focus was carefully directed toward the historical and social importance of the findings, rather than any form of glamorization of crime. After all, the legacy of violence left by Escobar deeply scarred generations of Colombians, and the opening of this safe provided yet another opportunity to better understand how that dark chapter of the country's history unfolded. Each object removed from that safe seemed to carry a story of its own, and together they formed a kind of time capsule of the drug trafficking underworld, the workings of a criminal empire, and the personal contradictions of a man who, despite everything, remains one of the most studied figures of recent decades. The safe itself became a symbol, the materialization of secrets long kept, now finally brought to light. And although much of its contents were deteriorated, their historical value remained intact. Perhaps the most curious aspect, however, was the realization that even so many years after Escobar's death, rumors of other hidden safes still persist throughout Colombia. Some believe that what was found is only the tip of the iceberg, and that dozens of other forgotten treasures may lie buried beneath old buildings, abandoned farms, or crumbling walls. Yet regardless of future discoveries, the opening of this safe has already gone down in history as one of the most revealing moments connected to the cartel's dark past. It brought not only curiosity, but also reflection. It showed that behind the violence, power, and fear existed a complex universe, full of contradictions and human details that are rarely exposed. And with each document revealed, each photograph analyzed, and each object catalogued, it becomes increasingly clear that understanding the past is essential to preventing similar tragedies from happening again.